Hi, I'm Sean Stone. Today, should Scotland be free from the United Kingdom? Stick around for Buzzsaw.
Central Intelligence Agency.
It was described by witnesses as
As Scotland prepares to vote a referendum to become independent from the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and essentially become a sovereign state, we're joined by Hugh Gilbert, who is a Scottish Rite Freemason Knight Templar, and he's going to give us an interesting perspective on the history of Scotland and why, according to his book, we should free the unicorn. So, Hugh, thank you for joining us. And
thanks for having me, Sean.
For most Americans, the issue of Scottish independence doesn't really make sense because we've seen Braveheart, and William Wallace seems to have succeeded in freeing the Scotland right from the British Empire back in the 14th century, along with Robert the Bruce, and yet Scotland is still part of the United Kingdom and Great Britain. So, first of all, can you explain what it means currently for Scotland to be part of Great Britain and why it's essential for us to understand why Scotland needs to be free?
Oh, Scottish independence to me is the only thing that must happen. It's a one-off chance we're getting right now. We haven't had this chance in hundreds of years to regain our sovereignty. And sovereignty is all about remembering who we are. That has been taken out of us. Scotland itself was very connected to the feminine energy throughout history. I can give examples of that. And since we have been aligned with Westminster, and I put Westminster as totally separate from England. I don't see that as the same thing. I see Westminster as a state within a state. And since we've come under their dominance or their rule, we have lost our identity in so many ways. And we need to reclaim that. We need to be a beacon for other countries to reclaim their identity, who they are, and to remember the feminine, basically, and the matriarchal pattern, the way things used to be.
Now, the title of your book you've written is called "Free the Unicorn," and you believe the unicorn actually represents Scotland because obviously the British flag has the lion and the unicorn, right? Almost in a combative image.
So that's why I wrote the book. I saw that the Royal Coat of Arms of England, if you look at it, has the unicorn of Scotland. If you Google the chained unicorn of Scotland, you're going to see it. My question is, why is it chained? When the independence issue came up, I'm asking, why is it chained to the throne? We may decide as a nation to stand beside that throne as allies, or we may choose to walk away. But why is it chained to the throne? I object to that completely. And then you have to ask yourself, why did he feel the need to chain it? What is it that drives them to chain it? There must be something they are concerned about, to put it mildly. And there is. It's about us remembering who we are.
So now tell us, what is that history? Because, as I said, from the American point of view, we think of Scotland, we think of William Wallace. There's also a hidden Knight Templar connection to the Wallace campaign against the British. Apparently, Robert the Bruce was allied by Knights Templar coming late into the battle and actually turning the tide in their victory in the 14th century. Correct?
Yeah, well, the Templars had actually been coming since 1124, somewhere in there, when King David met with Hugh de Payens of the Templars and Bernard de Clairvaux of the Cistercians order, who were cousins, I believe. And they set up a whole new system of running the nation, basically, the Davidian regime. And there were massive gold mines here and silver mines here. There still are. And the Templars as such began to gather from that point in time until there were over 600 massive properties here throughout Scotland owned by Templars as such, showing a fealty to the crown. Laterally, that would be to Robert the Bruce. But Bruce got excommunicated by the Vatican, and the Pope then asked the aristocracy of Scotland to give him up, basically stop supporting him, and they refused, so they got excommunicated as well. So then he went to the clergy and he said to the clergy, you give him up or stop following him. And they refused, so he excommunicated the clergy. And then he went to the people and said the same thing, and they refused. So Scotland had the pleasure of being the first entire country to be excommunicated by the Vatican. So, so in that place of total excommunication, when the Templars were threatened, in 13, let me just check my notes.
The Templars.
1307. Sorry,
Yeah.
I've got a thing about dates. In 1307. Templar persecution started, then Scotland was a safe place to be, so they flooded in.
Right, and then they helped ultimately turn the
They've
tide.
been coming basically since 1120. It began that far back.
But the Templars basically helped turn the tide, and they seem to have set up a bit of a base of operation after they were excommunicated by the church. The Templars then set up in Scotland to a large extent.
Now, remember, there were 625 properties already in place before that. So when the rest of them came in too, we certainly did. And they still have those operations, I'm sure, in various forms, in various structures throughout the British Isles, actually, but certainly from Scotland.
But there's there's also
sorry?
there's also a spiritual connection. It seems like there was a spiritual history to Scotland, and you can describe that? I mean, to this day, people have heard of Roslin Chapel and Roslin in Scotland being places of the mystery religion, let's say the mystery side of Christianity.
Well, the Da Vinci Code stuff, eh? But before that came out, I'd been in Roslin, and it was beautiful before it commercialized. It was dark, it was quiet, and Roslin's the kind of place where, I guess the best way to put it is, you don't go to her, she comes to you. You sit quietly, and you will feel the strength in Roslin. But Roslin itself is a coded version of Christianity, which is very connected to the earth, to the goddess, to the Magdalene, to the feminine. It's encoded in everything in it. It is also a replica of Herod's temple, including the Wailing Wall of Jerusalem, exact replica on the outside, which is where the Templars came from originally. And behind that was Solomon's temple. But inside there also, there is every, apart from the symbolism, astronomical symbols and all kinds of stuff, the mysteries go on forever, but also there is every plant in North America. So it commemorates the voyage of the Sinclairs in 1398, in 1398 to America. They were the first settlement there, and I've been to Maine, to where they were, and I've seen the Wexford Knight and stuff like that out there. So they were there, and Roslin was built in 1446, which is quite a while before Columbus in 1492. So Roslin again shows that we were there first, and the Templars were there first. Templar and Viking connections were there, amongst other places. So it's undeniable proof that it's all there for everybody to see, the stuff that's there. It was built before Columbus. So when you look at it from the historical perspective, or whether you look at it from an energetic perspective, or from a Christian perspective, Roslin holds the answers to so many things. Even some of the symbols on the notes are Chladni plates. You know, you put sound through vibrations, and it forms different patterns on the plate, right?
Right.
Well, Chladni plates weren't invented till a couple of hundred years ago, but they're up there.
Well, there's obviously
a
deeper esoteric knowledge. Well, there's a deeper esoteric knowledge.
That knowledge. It's all, there's so much packed into Roslin. But Roslin is placed on a site. Roslin is placed on a site, which pilgrims have been coming to for a long, long period of time, way before Roslin was actually built. The Sinclairs were given stewardship of that site. It's called the Way of the Stars. Is this okay to go through this part?
Of
so
course.
you get into the land of Roslin itself, which is Scotland, really. And it begins at Compostela. The Templars built cathedrals in all of these sites, but these sites were there and well used before the Templars built amazing cathedrals on them. And the first one was built at Compostela in Spain, and is connected to the first chakra energetically, and the planet is connected to is the moon. The second one that Templars built is in Toulouse, in France. It's the second chakra, and the planet is connected to is Mercury. The third is Orléans, third chakra, and the planet is Venus. The fourth is Chartres in French, and the planet is the sun, which really would let you think that maybe the human heart is the Holy Grail, and I tend to concur with that a little bit. The fifth is Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was linked to Mars. And Amiens in France was also linked to Jupiter, which would be the sixth chakra. And then Roslin, as a crown jewel, is linked to Saturn. So these 7 chakras, so the Templars would spend approximately a year in each location, roughly, training, shall we say, opening up their energetic and their esoteric knowledge, and then they would finish up at Roslin. But for a thousand years before that, pilgrims were making their journey, and it lines up with these planets, and these planets will align again on the 28th of July 2019. These planets will line up as named exactly over those locations, and I believe that date may be very important, because the saying "as above, so below" will certainly be enforced when that day comes. It should be an interesting day. Mm-hmm. Now, beyond Roslin, beyond the mystery of Roslin, there is another place, and the other place is called Schiehallion, Schehalllion. It's a mountain in Scotland. It's a crystal mountain. There was an 8th chakra, shall we say, and the higher initiates knew to go there. There's no point in going if you hadn't done your work in the first 7. It wouldn't mean much to you anyhow. But the higher initiates of many branches of religion went to Schiehallion. There is a tree just at the foot of it called the Fortingale yew tree. It's over 5,000 years old. And for about 400 years, it was called the Yeshua tree. So it would have it that a young Jesus was there with his uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, who would be like Donald Trump, right? Nowadays, he owned a lot of the mines throughout Europe, and as part of his education, he was brought to Fortingale. It was called the Yeshua tree. And interestingly enough, beside that is a little plaque, just a little plaque in the field. It says, "Birthplace of Pontius Pilate."
Wow.
You begin to really see something different going on in Scotland as you connect to that land. A little further over, we have proof that Merlin was here. Merlin was based out of what's now Glasgow, in the area of Strathclyde, and what was then known as Cumbria. So the magic of the Druids was there. If you go to Stobel Kirk in Scotland, you will see a window, stained glass window, of St. Kentigern baptizing Merlin, which wouldn't have happened. Merlin was not really into becoming a Christian. I don't think that was his thing, okay? So that's a Christian version of what happened, but it does validate that Merlin was there. And Loch Lomond, further down, which everybody loves the Bonnie Banks, would be what the Celts would call Tir na Nog, which is the land of the ever young, and very Merlin-esque in its energy. It's a double portal, it's all kinds of things. But there is a little statue on it, and it's a statue of a little boy. And it's out on the loch. It's not even in a very prominent place. And it's, when you ask who it is, it's Peter Pan. You're getting the message, because you ask the locals, what is that there for? And they say, oh, it's just that guy, Barry, that wrote the book about Peter Pan. He made a wee statue and he put it on the land, and we didn't like it, so we told him to put it out on the loch, and he did. Well, if you want to believe that, that's fine. But basically, you've got Peter Pan symbolizing the land of the ever young. Mm-hmm. Okay? Right there. So people were brought up with a very earth culture at that time. At that time, when they fought, you've all seen Braveheart. They fought, yeah, they yelled at the enemy before they fought, but if you go to Killiecrankie, for example, the battle took like half an hour, and the Scots yelled at the English, and it's not an anti-English thing, it's just their opponents, for a couple of hours, and then they moved an attack, and the battle was over in 20 minutes, and they were amazed at the ferocity of their wounds. But Preston Pans, the English set up and said, come and get us, give us your best shot. It took 20 minutes. and just scattered them. Battle of Roslin, 30,000 English troops, well trained, scattered. We left some alive. There was only 6,000 Scots made the attack. Were we better fighters than them? No. It was the energy, because when they yelled, they were coming from the feminine. When they yelled, when that power of the voice, sound vibration, we know it's all about sound. We all know this. When that hit a certain pitch, that energy moved. And when it moved, it went through everything that was in front of it. There was nothing would stop it. That's the unicorn. That's the feminine. That's the connection to the land and to the planet. And that's what they took away from us. Basically at Culloden, it died there, because what they did in essence was they wiped out the clans. We were set up in an area where they couldn't run. They said it's a battlefield. Why would we pick it? The heather and the gorse was about 2 feet thick. They couldn't run anyhow. They were standing in the wind and the sleet for a day and a half. It didn't make any sense. It was never a battle. It was a massacre. And the clans were wiped out there. They were not allowed to speak the language again. They were not allowed to wear the tartan again. The men were shipped overseas as slaves, basically. Why bother sending them anywhere if you could kill them on the spot? They were shipped overseas, and the hills were covered in sheep instead. The men were gone. So the culture died. The Celtic, the Highland sword dance that you see at the Highland Games, that was the men that used to do that. They would dance in bare feet over the 2 crossed swords. And at the end of it, they still you'll see them do it, the girls do it, they pick the sword up. Well, that was the men that used to do that, because you could not pick up a weapon until you could dance. You had to be in balance, you had to be in flow. And all of that is gone. All of that has been taken away. And we've forgotten who we are.
Well, there was a time. There was a time. There was a time. The Stuart kings, the Scottish kings, were on the English throne, right? After this is the 17th century still, and yet, when was the final subjugation of Scotland? And obviously, we now know the German bloodline was brought over, right? The Georges and the ancestors of now Queen Elizabeth, they were brought over. So when was this subjugation of Scotland finalized?
I'd say 1746 in Culloden, because the Union of the Crowns was 1707, I think, somewhere around there. But the rebellions were still happening. But 1746 finished it. The nation was genocide. Even at Bannockburn itself, a lot of Edward's army were European troops. They'd been given license to do with Scotland as they wanted, should they have won that battle, had the Templars not been there.
Right.
And it would have been genocide. Edward had told them, do what they want.
Do you see...
Because you had a world... Sorry?
No, I said, do you see England as an extension of the Vatican power, essentially? I mean, if we talk about this history of the Templars...
The royalty has, yes, for sure.
Yes,
England
right.
is not the same thing. We had a corrupt system run by corrupt monarchies basically throughout Europe, and it was backed at that time by the Vatican. Well, now there's not an awful lot has changed, only we've got Westminster backed by large corporate, and who's behind that? Well, we can go on forever. But the same system is basically arising again, and we have one more chance to step away from it in a civil way, by voting. By voting. And for Scots to remember who they are, because true sovereignty for everybody on the planet is about remembering who you are. This is a unicorn. They are scared that we'd remember this worldwide, wherever you come from. If we remember who we are, their game is over. It's finished.
That's the key
point. So sovereignty is not about the flag that you wave. Scotland was the first country to have a flag, by the way, and that was the St. Andrew's flag, right? First European country to have a flag, and that was around 1400, though something says it goes back to 900, but somewhere around 1400, the saltire came out, and that is the cross arms, and that's the X of the masculine and the feminine, as we know. And the head is the knowledge. A head represents knowledge, so put it together, and you have the pirate flag. There were no pirates. They were Templars.
They were Templars.
Holding the knowledge.
And it reminds me of the tradition of the pharaohs of Egypt and how they were mummified with this position, right? So the skull and became then the Templars became the pirates became the skull and bones. That tradition lives on. The question for me, for you, would be when this referendum occurs, what sort of government would Scotland assume if it became independent? Because obviously we're talking about, you said yourself, there's been a severance, there's been a break from the tradition, from the more clan-based structure of society, right? How would government work now? Would it be a republic? democratic, or do you think they should ultimately go back to a type of king, or a king and queen, or sovereignty of that sort?
I don't know. I'm hoping it's democratic, it's run by the people. The Declaration of Our Growth, well, we can't miss that. It was the biggest document ever written. And it was written on behalf of people everywhere, not just, it's a statement for liberty for the planet. And it was written in, I'll just check here, my notes, 1320, 6 years after Bannockburn. And what it was, it gave the people the power that if the king was usurped, if the king was not true to his people, then the people could replace the king. It gave the power to the people, basically. That was the whole essence behind it. And then the American Declaration of Independence was written along the exact same lines as the Declaration of Our Growth in that way. So we have one more chance again to hand the power back to the people. And we need to take it. We need to take it. There's so much at stake.
How do you see things going currently? What is the mood in Scotland? Do you think it's going to be pro-independence?
Very hard to gauge. Most people are playing it very quiet. Most people are keeping their vote to themselves. It's typical Scot. There's a few shouting from this side and shouting from that side, but I know we'll make it. I mean, in the sake of materials, we still have silver mines. We have gold mines they're not telling us about. Westminster didn't tell us about it. We have more oil in the Clyde than there is in the oil fields off Aberdeen. That's not been touched yet. There's a gold mine being mined in Loch Lomond Park. We found the biggest oil field in the planet just off the Shetlands. It's called the Clare Field. Interesting, like Sinclair. The Clare Field has been found the biggest field in the planet, and the Prime Minister knows about it and didn't tell the Scots about it. How can we vote when they're not giving us the truth of the things that we have? But we also have the capacity with the wind and the water technology that we have to not even rely on these basic commodities. We can supply a third of Europe, 180 million people, from a population base of 5.5 million people. So we're going to survive just fine. It's not about economically will we make it. There is no doubt in my mind that we will make it. And they say, will we keep the pound or won't we keep the pound? We'll keep whatever we want because we will be a commodity that the world will want as a nation. So we're not worried about that. But we'll get back to the Scottish way of running things again, which I really would like to see. It'll be a democracy, but we have 18 months after passing the vote. It's not as though we pass the vote and the Scottish National Party are in. It's not about that. It means that we have 18 months from that point to vote, to decide which party we want to. So at least we start making our own decisions again. We start reconnecting to our own heritage instead of taking the handouts, as far as I'm concerned. I know there's others who will argue with me, but I don't care anymore. It's not about that. It goes way deeper in all of this stuff. We'll be just fine.
Yeah, and I, for one, support the independence because I think you have to separate yourself from the British Empire, which to this day is one of the worst one of the worst factors in all world events. They have a tremendous hand that people don't even consider and account for when things are blamed on America. The British Empire is still a factor and major decider in a lot of these things, especially financially.
I repeat, it's not about England. I've got many friends. My father's English, and I have many friends I love. They're great people. Don't take us an anti-English thing. This is an anti-Westminster thing. It's not the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's like a state within a state.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Or the city.
There are parts of England who are just as suppressed as we are.
Yeah.
In Scotland. So it's definitely not against the English at all. It's come again. It's the rich against the rest again. It's come around again, the same thing. And it's time for the Declaration of Our Growth to mean something again. And it's time to remember Merlin and to remember Schiehallion and remember the feminine and remember the voice that died at Culloden. And that's why there's such sadness there. Such a sadness when you go there and you listen to the lies that they tell about what happened there and the lies that they tell when you go to Roslin about what happened there. I remember I was going to one of the guides one day. I was sitting there and I couldn't take it anymore. The stories they were telling were so vulgar, as far as I'm concerned, about the beauty of that amazing place. And I was just going to stand up and ask him a question because I knew a simple question would blow it out of the water. It's so easy to disenfranchise what they're saying. And as I went to stand up, I got two hands on my shoulders, and the voice behind me said, "Not yet." And my wife was with me, and we turned around, and there was no one behind me.
Wow.
And I can feel those hands to this day, and I heard the voice saying, not yet. And the only thing that stopped me was it said, not yet. It didn't say, don't do it.
Yeah.
It means your time's coming. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, I can wait for that. So
And-
as long as it's coming, I'm fine.
And
So
now-
for the sake of
yeah.
our children who've forgotten their roots, we have to get back to our roots. We have to reconnect to our land. That's why our ancestry is so important. We're holding stuff from our ancestors. Science has proven that now, that genetically we hold stuff from generations back. Generations back. They're proving it in animals, so it's the same in us. So we must reconnect to all of this stuff. This is like the Hawaiians are doing. It's the same thing. They're reconnecting to the roots of reclaiming sovereignty. It's not about the flag they fly. It's about remembering who they are.
Absolutely.
And that's what I want for my country here.
Well, I definitely support that, and I think it's very succinct. And thank you for joining us, Hugh, and expressing that. And people can find your book, Free the Unicorn. Is it available online?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah. If they
Amazon.
go to hughgilbertauthor.com, they'll get me on there because I've got 2 or 3 books. But that's the one that holds my heart right now. Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic.
John, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Of course. Thank you for joining us and speaking your truth. And hopefully that voice that said not yet is saying now is the time.
Oh, it's happening, Sean. Yeah,
Absolutely.
for sure, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks, Hugh. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers. Yeah, bye-bye.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another in-depth story into another land, another time that has been forgotten, and the quality of the spiritual resonance of what a place means. And I hope that you were given some insight into Scotland, the spiritual connection that it holds. Perhaps it needs to be explored by more of us, and ultimately needs to be remembered by its own people, who hopefully will seize the opportunity and proclaim their independence once again. This is Sean Stone signing off.